Our next session is a fireside chat that hits at the heart of leadership in today's world. Titled Leading with Care, How Empathy and Trust Drive Performance, this conversation welcomes back Craig Cowdrey, the co-founder and CEO of Sonder, and Andrea Clarke, who is an award-winning author, work futurist, and expert on the future of work. Andrea inspires leaders to embrace change through practical habits, through adaptability, and through some really powerful storytelling, helping teams and organisations to really thrive under pressure. I think that all the best leaders that I've known in my life understand that care is about more than just compassion. It's actually a competitive advantage within your workplace as well. Andrea and Craig are going to explore how empathy and trust transform the way that organisations adapt, the way organisations perform, and the way organisations thrive. Through stories, data, and lived experience, Andrea and Craig are going to show us that leading with care is by no means soft leadership. It is the foundation of sustainable performance. Please make them very welcome.
Hello again. Great to see everyone. Still bright-eyed and bushy-tailed, doing a lot of that upregulation breathing, I'm sure, although you won't need it this session because we've got a great one in store for you. So a lot of the theme that's been coming through out the day has really been about empathy and trust, and that's where we're going to focus in on in this session to land this plane of Sonder's first summit. Empathy is so important, of course, in so many different contexts. For us at Sonder, it's really core to what we do internally and with our members and with our customers. The definition of the word Sonder, actually, which we didn't invent, it was invented by someone who does such things a couple of years before we grabbed it for ourselves, is to have the realisation that every random passerby is living a life as vivid and complex as your own. So, a fancy way, I guess, of saying empathy. And we regularly talk about what that means for us, putting ourselves into the shoes of our members, to the shoes of our customers, and being member and customer-centric to make sure that we're driving great output and outcomes for them. It's part of our high-performance push internally, especially considering that we have such an eclectic group of people in our company. If you think about the fact that we have a cutting-edge technology-focused part of the business and then a cutting-edge clinical and human services part of the business altogether, you're getting a lot of people from different backgrounds who speak often different languages, literally, as their first language, but also a bunch of different acronyms, especially from the military. People love a TLA, three-letter acronym. And so translating that to each other is really of huge value, because with those different perspectives comes the ability to have the best idea win. And to harness that, you need to have that empathy to understand where somebody's coming from, and of course to assume at all times, as we certainly try to, that they mean with good intent, and sometimes communication can be difficult, but having that empathy is really important to them building that trust, which, as we've discussed today, is such a foundational element of having a psychologically safe environment in which you can have those conversations to ensure your culture is strong, to ensure you're achieving your objectives as an individual, as a team, and as an organisation. So to get this discussion going, we're really, really lucky to have Andrea Clarke with us here today. Let me introduce Andrea before I take a seat there with you. Andrea is an award-winning author and work futurist who knows a thing or two about leadership and the future of work. Her most recent book is called Adapt, and as the name suggests, it's about adapting, particularly to periods and of change, which is so relevant, of course, to us in this world right now. I'd highly recommend you check it out. She's had a pretty extraordinary career, and that's putting it lightly. Andrea has held roles in media and communications across places as diverse as the White House to Baghdad. And I won't make any jokes about how the White House is probably a bit of a battleground at times as well, to humanitarian projects and hotspots around the world. Andrea now spends her time helping leaders and organisations build resilience, adaptability and trust. We're really lucky, as I said, to have Andrea with us today. Please join me in welcoming her.
Thank you very much. Thank you. That sounds so impressive. Can you let my parents know what I do?
We'll send them the video, no problem. I'm sure they're very proud.
Everyone needs their own MC.
Thank you, as I said, for joining us. We really do appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.
So you have built a career across some of the world's most high-pressure environments. Looking back, when you get the chance, I know you're very busy, but looking back, what did those experiences teach you about the role of care and empathy in leadership?
Thank you for having me, first up. I generally speaking, don't believe that we can demonstrate high performance. We can't create high performance teams unless we are demonstrating high performance traits. And I believe that starts with creating the right environment. I can share an example with you that I was thinking about when we spoke last week. That was an assignment that I had in Baghdad, where I was basically sent there to interview a range of people who were recipients of the aid funding that we were receiving, in order to prove that aid was getting to the ground and working, so we could refinance the same project a year later. And it was a very tense situation. It was 2008. Iraq was very volatile. I was picked up from the airport it was a full security team, 5-car convoy to the compound, which was in the red zone. It was not in the green zone. So we had militia backed up at the fence, shooting RPGs literally over the fence. It was a very, very tense environment. And what was really important to me was every morning when I got up to work with the news crew was setting very clear boundaries. I feel that trust really starts with communication and being very clear. And it was also Ramadan. So my local Iraqi news crew were fasting, and it was about 45 degrees. It was insanely hot, I remember, on that particular trip. And so we all agreed every morning, we sort of had to, by virtue of the circumstance that we were in, we had an agreement to anchor everything in courteous confrontation. So we all had an agreement that any time through the day that the assignment was going to be impacted by something that was going on with any one of us, we would just put that on the table, regardless of what that was. So if I had unintentionally agitated my cameraman or my soundman, or if anything went wrong, we just all agreed we were going to be courteous about confronting one another. Otherwise, we were going to impact the entire mission and the assignment. And that set up an opportunity for all of us to establish, build and really accelerate trust with one another from the start. And it was a very demanding situation. It was very violent. We were woken up by car bombs just about every morning on that trip. Very confronting environment to be in. And I think that the lesson for all of us is, are we being candid enough with the people around us every day as the tension in our own lives escalates? And that's exactly what's happening. We are all feeling overwhelmed for a multitude of reasons, but we're not necessarily calling out what those reasons are and being clear about the kind of environment that we're all finding ourselves in at the moment. So how do we encourage and promote a sense of courteous confrontation with people in our teams as leaders? And I think that is a starting point for driving high performance in a context that's tense, that's uncomfortable, and has volatility in a range of ways, because we all would have a version of that in the corporate workplace, a sense of discomfort.
Yeah, I wonder, and just building on that point about that approach being contextualised, and you're in an extreme situation and environmentally, temperature, Ramadan, where people not having the fuel through the day as they usually would have, the hostile environment, you're in RPGs flying around, car bombs going off. So it sounds like you've applied in that situation a really accelerated sort of set of rules around setting psychological safety. Let's get mission aligned. Let's know our purpose. And that courteous confrontation, because that word is confronting, right? And so I wonder what's your approach in the sort of in Australia, New Zealand,
what we don't want is to get to a crisis and then start putting in some guardrails. So no matter how calm or how chaotic you feel like your environment is at the moment, don't wait until it's too late. I always think we want all the options we can get to set up the right safe environment that promotes the kind of behaviour that we're proud of. We want runway to be able to do that. And so, we're heading into a really tough time at the moment where polycrisis fatigue is real. Like, that is the exhaustion that people feel when multiple crises start overlapping. That's not necessarily being articulated in the workplace. And the great thing about Futures work is helping people be better prepared for what is coming next. So it doesn't matter how calm or chaotic you experience your workplace now, finding ways to govern behaviour and provide the opportunity for everyone to have a say, everyone to have a voice in how they're feeling, I think, is a fast track to accelerating trust.
And building again, I mean, as a leader, in terms of modelling those trust behaviours, and aside from talking to the team proactively, what sort of attributes in a leader are the types of things you've found in your experience that are really going to get that accelerated trust dynamic going, trust in the leader, trust in each other as well?
Well, I spent 17 years working in an ultra-high-performance news crew that was always remote, always distributed, rarely, we were not in the office every single day. And when I think about that question, I think about the DNA of trust. And what I think about often is the way Rachel Botsman explains that, and that is when someone's thinking about trusting you in any context, they're really asking themselves three questions, and that is around competency, consistency, and character. So in terms of competency, does this person have the skills, the knowledge, and the wherewithal to deliver what they tell me they're going to deliver? And character is about simply having your best interests at heart. We all know when someone does not have our best interests at heart. That erodes trust immediately. But I think the most important factor is consistency. That is consistency of behaviours over time. And we would have all had this experience already in our career, because I'm assuming everyone here is over 25. So you may or may not have had this experience, but you'll know what I mean. Where prior to COVID, at least, you're part of a team, someone shows up, they're in a great mood, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, but Thursday they show up differently. And for whatever reason, we're not knowing what the reasons are, but they show up demonstrating different behaviours or traits. That issue around consistency of behaviours over time is critically important to that DNA of trust. And I think that's the most important element of trust. So when I think about great leaders and how we can exercise great leadership, that's where it begins. It begins with all of us asking ourselves those questions. How might I be unconsciously undermining trust by not being consistent, by not demonstrating those three elements to people around me? I think we all have an opportunity to reflect on our own behaviours and question whether we're living up to each of those elements, because that DNA over time is what makes teams unstoppable. Yeah.
How do you get yourself up and going to have that consistency? Because, pressures affect all of us, and certainly I'm sure yourself, like myself and everyone here. Maintaining that consistency is hard work. Is there anything that you're doing to maintain that motivation? And
finding space to reflect. I rarely think that there's rarely growth without reflection, and we're all short on time for reflection today. And this is not going to be a popular view, but even getting up an hour earlier for yourself, I know, Mr. Sninger, I know, it's ambitious, I know, but we're not here to be average. A year ago, I said to myself, I'm going to get up an hour earlier because I need an hour to myself to reflect on what I need to do in order for me to write a book and be sitting here with you having a conversation like this. So I know it's not a popular view, but I think there's nothing more powerful than understanding yourself and understanding what is changing within you as well as that external environment. So your belief systems, your values, your habits, your behaviours. So anytime you can claw back for self-reflection is going to be a valuable experience for you, because that's an exercise in self-awareness and in thinking through how am I being consistent in my behaviours over time.
And I know in the last session, Justin mentioned that the productivity gains from use of AI, and we'll talk a bit about AI later, shouldn't necessarily be put automatically into more work, but actually using some of that time for connection, as he spoke about, or potentially reflection in what you're speaking about, Andrea.
Yeah.
Empathy as a leadership skill, you've spoken in your body of work pretty extensively around empathy not being a soft skill,
Yep.
but really a hard skill for modern leaders. Why do you think that's so important right now?
Well, I think the greater the uncertainty, the greater the demand for empathy and leadership. And there is no universe in which greater uncertainty, there's no universe in which we should be ignoring the role of empathy as a leader now, because we all know how much change we're coping with, how much is coming towards us. And it's a very real thing for everyone that we work with. And there's, as you said in your intro, you have no idea what other people are going through. And so following a line of inquiry, not just to ask someone about their workload, but to ask them more questions about what's really going on with them, I mean, someone actually said to me through COVID, this was a really interesting insight that I hadn't considered, but a great friend of mine who works at a major bank was saying that the difficulty she was having was that when you walk past someone in the workplace and you can see they've broken their ankle, you've got a visual cue to ask how you are and are you getting the right care, etc. But when you're dealing with someone remotely, you don't necessarily have that luxury. You've got to go down a line of inquiry to make sure that you're getting out of that person the right level of disclosure to make sure that that mutual value exchange is there, that the company can offer the right care that's required. So there's never been more that's been asked of leaders today, and that is just where we find ourselves. And so I think that we've all got to dig deeper at a time where we don't necessarily have the energy for it, but the payoff is going to be extraordinary, because if we step back through this phase, that the cost of that is going to be extraordinary.
So this theme has come up a little bit throughout today around where the balance lies between individual accountability versus sort of employer-provided support and care.
Yep.
What are your views on that balance, and particularly how you see care related to high performance as well?
Well, I believe in the mutual value exchange in the workplace. So I believe that generally speaking is 50-50. We show up, we bring 50% to the table, we do the work, and the other 50% the employer meets us and we get paid. And when there's an imbalance there that goes on for too long, that is where obviously we start to feel like we're not losing interest, that's not the right word, but when that balance is out of whack, that's really compromising performance, it's compromising everything that we feel about being in that workplace. And so I think that there is absolutely more individual accountability required now, because we've been given more autonomy. I mean, post-COVID, we've all been handed a sense of agency that we've never had before. You think about, before COVID, we all showed up 9 to 5, Monday to Friday for the last 25 years of our lives, and all of a sudden there's a very loose, less structured environment that we have to find ourselves in. And so that's a very difficult thing for many of us, because we need that structure. We've traded on that structure to know exactly what those expectations are of us. And so we've been handed a lot of agency. I think the companies doing really well are the companies that are building and strengthening agency in their people. And not every business wants to do that because they don't want people having too much agency. But I see that as a non-negotiable now, because if imagine you've got 5,000 employees and you've got 5,000 people who don't really have a strong sense of agency. They're not acting as an effective agent for themselves, making decisions about how to build and accelerate trust, making decisions about how to exercise leadership. And, if we're going to do anything important in our career or big in our career, we are going to need other people to trust us, and we have to take responsibility for building that trust. So I think it's a 50-50. We've got to meet the workplace halfway. And when there's an imbalance in that ratio, we've got to put our hand up and say, let's have an honest conversation about what's happening here.
Thank you. AI. So you have written that avoiding AI, in your view, is often a defence mechanism rooted in fear and lack of trust. Going back to that trust element, what role do leaders play in helping people feel safe enough to embrace AI, and not only embrace it but even see it as an opportunity?
So what I don't see happening in major ASX businesses at the moment is there's major change, big, scary, intimidating change being introduced, yet there's no corresponding conversation about what change feels like. And I think there's no more important time than now to have a conversation around the facts about change, because the facts about change are that we don't like it. We are wired for sameness. We are addicted to routine. This is probably why most of us here order the same coffee every day. Would that be fair? Yep. It's so interesting that even ordering the same coffee every day, even not seeking variation, impacts our ability to adapt. And so it's an excellent time to have an honest conversation about the facts around change, because we don't like it and because we see change as a loss and we don't necessarily equate it to a gain. And when you think about back to the biggest change you've been through in the last 10 years, think about when that change was right up in front of you. Did you see that as a loss? If you get an email from your boss at 4 o'clock today saying, we need to have a conversation at 10 a.m. tomorrow, where does your mind go? It probably doesn't go to, I'm getting promoted. It probably doesn't go there. We're on default to see change as a loss. And it's our responsibility to convert that to a gain. And so we can't do that, though, if we're living in a state of fear. So I think the job of leaders today is to help shift the workforce at scale from fear into curiosity, to start asking questions, to start, first of all, being candid about what change feels like. It's clunky. There's a lot of uncertainty for everyone. We're not alone. And I think when we all put our hand up and say, I mean, how does change feel to everyone today? Right? Anyone here super comfortable with the idea of uncertainty? No. So we're all feeling the same way. And I think even calling that out is helpful to all of us, because we all can see that we're starting from the same baseline. And so we're all going through this change together. So let's be honest about it. Let's be candid about it. How does it feel? Encourage and promote honesty and some candour around what change really feels like, because we are about to go through the messiest 10 years of our lives. I'm the ultimate optimist, but I also balance that with realism. So let's be honest about how it feels today and start looking down the pipeline to see how we can be better prepared for the change coming our way.
Before we get to that next 10 years, you spoke about change being associated with a loss.
Yeah.
I want to ask about your experiences, if anything comes to mind.
Yeah, sure.
Where it might have been a gain, actually, as opposed to a loss.
So many of those. So I was, in 2008, I had what I thought was the best job in the world. I was a reporter based in Washington, DC. I was working on K Street. Very, very cool place to be. Obama was in. It was like the whole country was on a honeymoon. That's how it felt. It was a really addictive time to be in the Capitol. And I was covering State Department, Pentagon, White House for Thomson Reuters, Al Jazeera English and 7 Network. And I was walking down the street to the bureau one morning, and for the first time in my entire journalism career, I did not pick up a copy of the newspaper because I was looking at the headlines on my smartphone. And in that moment, I recognised that the business model of news was failing right in front of me, and I was a part of it. And it was about to take me down if I didn't think of a way out of it. And I had to convert that loss to a gain pretty quickly, because I was very attached to that role in many ways. It's a very addictive thing to be part of a high-performance news team. And so I had to really think through, what is the upside of this change? Well, the upside is, if my prediction is that the news business is going to fragment and fail for a lot of major organisations, which it essentially did, and at the time we were all working 7 days a week, 12 hours a day for not very much money, I wanted to give myself as many options as I possibly could. That was in 2008. And I still have colleagues in the news business calling me saying, I've decided to get out of journalism like in 2025. Can you help me? Like, I definitely cannot help you. Because adaptability gives us... I definitely can't, because adaptability gives us options. And we all want runway to be better prepared for what's coming next. And so that takes a degree of courage to really recognise that weak signal of change and to make a decision about your future based around that signal. And so I converted that loss to a gain pretty quickly, because I thought if I can step out of journalism and retrain in an entirely different set of skills, I would start to future-proof myself, and I would always be employed, even if I wasn't employed in a full-time role. I would always have job security, because the only security I felt I could give myself was the security that I actually created around my skill set. So,
just a phenomenal example of being so self-aware of your circumstances, but also the industry in which you were working and getting on the front foot years before people really started to grasp.
And I think the real point of intervention for all of us is everyone else seems fine and really happy. And I remember going up to the newsroom and saying to my colleagues, random question, but out of interest, do you have another option apart from this amazing job that we have? And everyone said to me, are you joking? We're in television. We're in television. We're untouchable.
No streaming yet?
So arrogant. So no humility at all, because everyone was loving the wardrobe allowance, the invites everywhere, everything else, right? That was a really great thing to be exploiting. But while everyone was distracted with what they were exploiting, I felt they were missing the real story, and that was what was changing around us. And it pays great dividends for all of us to be paying attention very closely to the signals of change around us, because that's when we can feel more confident about the kind of future we want to move towards.
So that brings us to 2025. And throughout the day, and I started the day by talking about some of the challenges that we face, particularly in the world of safety, health and wellbeing. And I didn't use the expression, boiling frogs in boiling water, and not really realising that. You've picked in your industry back then what was happening. What are your views on the coming years in terms of this? It feels like an increasing rate of change, does feel like a permanent crisis. And just to make a point quickly, as you think about that, but linking that to AI, one of the ways that we've launched our AI approach within Sonder is to ensure that our staff really understand that this isn't about sort of AI taking their jobs, but it's about actually giving you the skills to be future-proofed, to be able to use AI, because we believe that if not now, then within a couple of years, if you're applying for a job and saying you can't use AI even at a basic level, at least, it would be like saying you can't use email.
Yeah.
Yeah. So can you share a little bit about where you see the world right now, wherever you'd like to dive into?
So I've got two things to talk about. The first thing is I don't want anyone here showing up to a job interview in 2035 with a resume that's from 2024. So we all have to take responsibility for the role of learning in our lives, regardless of where and how we're employed. The role of learning is everything. It is a form of power. And when you diminish and discount or delay learning, that is only going to impact your ability to stay current and relevant. And even if you leave AI 6 months now, I think that you're going to end up being 5 years behind the person next to you in the workplace. Like, that is how fast it is moving. And there is a real thing called tech dislocation. So, I mean, does anyone here have a parent who refuses to upgrade the software on their iPad? I mean, we all have that person in our family, right? No one wants to be that person, but that is a very dangerous place to be for us as a generation moving forward. So we've got to exercise a relentless commitment to active learning. And there's one other point I wanted to make about the role of community capital. I think this is a signal that's coming up in my work repeatedly, and I think it's relevant for everyone here, because businesses who really want to examine the current model of the workplace are starting to look at, for example, a Pilates studio. Now, a Pilates studio does more than just strengthen your core. It creates a dynamic community that sits around it, that's very powerful, that has all of those social ties that give us longevity. And so that role of community capital is going to be more relevant for all of us, because all of the data is there about the quality of our relationships determining the quality of and longevity of our life. And so what are we doing as businesses to reimagine our business model, reimagine the way we bring people together, and how can we strengthen and boost that sense of belonging, and how are we all going about building a sense of community capital, even in our own teams? I think that is going to be a dominant theme. And when I look at the data around polycrisis fatigue, which is linked to a sense of belonging, 71% of Australian GPs are saying that mental health is the number one reason for patient visits now. I mean, that is extraordinary. So we're seeing a gradual checking out of life and communities at scale, and we all need to think about what is our individual role as a leader in building a greater sense of community capital, and how might we do that does not involve a workplace model from 1950, because that's essentially what we're dealing with. Yeah, we need to ask. I believe our responsibility as leaders today is to stop asking the wrong questions. So adaptability is the bridge between a good today and a great tomorrow. Adaptability is the bridge to the future. And so how well we adapt trades exclusively on the quality of the questions that we're asking of ourselves today. And every day I hear leaders ask the same questions, and that's how do we manage change, which usually says to me, the change has already happened, we're not prepared for it, or we have no idea what we're doing. Now, that's fine, but I think the better question we can start asking is, how do I anticipate it? And we've got the data around belonging and wellbeing, longevity, etc. So what are we actually doing with that data? How are we all going about strengthening a sense of community capital so we can all look after one another through these very volatile years that I think are ahead of us?
We have to wrap up momentarily. I'm sorry I don't have an opportunity to sort of share questions from the audience, but Andrea has assured me she's generously going to stay around for some time after the summit concludes at around 4 o'clock. But I'd ask you as a parting, we've been asking a lot of speakers to give a parting thought. I'd ask you if there's one habit or practice you'd challenge every leader in this room to adopt tomorrow to lead with more care and with more trust. What would that be?
Start asking new questions for a new era. Don't play the same game. Don't show up every day with the same questions, the same mindset, using the same tools. If you want to end up in a preferred future, the kind of future that you have co-created with your team, start today asking new questions that are fit for purpose for where we're headed. So lead with foresight and not hindsight.
Love it, and I'll co-opt that into a theme I spoke about earlier around getting ahead of the curve. So I'll just piggyback onto that lovely and very practical parting advice. So that concludes our fireside with Andrea. So I'd ask you all to please join me in thanking Andrea for her time.
Thank you. Thank you, Craig.
Thank you so much to Andrea and to Craig for what was a really candid conversation with a whole bunch of takeaways in there. It's a really powerful reminder to all of us, I think, that leadership grounded in care and in empathy and trust is what drives performance and strengthens our teams.